Hi, I'm Bly, watercolor artist and mom of 6. My passions are people, paint, and petals. Please join me from my kitchen table where I teach you fun watercolor skills so that you can incorporate this creative hobby into your own busy life. Hi everybody, thanks for joining me. So today we're going to paint some cosmos and some calendula flowers, and I've given you in your boxes these little accordion fold booklets as well. And so the idea with these is to use what you learn in our painting to then make your own paintings on here. And you can use the little ribbon to hang it up. Like you could hang it from a doorway, or you could give this to somebody as a card. So this is just for you for fun after we do our practice here. So to get started, we're going to mix all the colors that we're going to use in our painting first. So get your brush out, and some of you will have a little plastic cap over your brush. Just take that off and swish it around in your water, and that will soften the bristles. Now I've given you 5 different colors. We have pink grapefruit, ultramarine rose, grass, which is like a bright green color, patina, which is like a turquoise, and then the natural yellow. And we're going to use these 5 colors to get all the different shades in our painting. So we're just going to swatch our colors first. And I'm just using this scrap piece of paper. So you can use one of your 3 sheets of paper. I would do it in a corner, and that way you can use the rest of the paper for either practicing or another painting. All right, so here's the green. It's a really bright kind of Christmas green color. And then we have the patina, which is a mixture of sky blue and turquoise pigment. So it's like a blue to the green kind of color, kind of aqua. Here's our yellow. Ultramarine rose, which actually turns out looking, that just looks dirty. Hang on. The ultramarine rose looks pinkier than it does in the pan. At least I think it does. There we go. All right. And then the pink grapefruit, which is a really, really pretty color. All right, so now we're going to practice mixing these colors to get the other shades that we're going to be using. So first I'm going to mix a little bit of the pink grapefruit with the ultramarine rose. And people ask me a lot how often I clean my palette, and the answer is almost never. I cleaned it today because I want you to be able to see the colors that I'm mixing clearly. But usually I don't mix it. I don't clean it. I just mix over what's already there. And I think that's what most artists do. So I'm mixing the ultramarine rose with a little bit of the pink grapefruit. Just a little bit, makes it more of a rosy color. And this is what we're going to use for our Cosmo flowers here. Now we're going to mix some varying proportions of the yellow and the pink grapefruit to get different orange colors for the calendula flowers. So just get some on your brush and on your palette, mix up a couple different selections of oranges. So this is kind of a medium orange, right in between the yellow and the pink grapefruit. I'm going to mix some more of the pink grapefruit into this one. And then more yellow into this one. Now I'm going to also add more water to this one to make it lighter. Water is basically like adding white to your paint, because in watercolor you don't use white. Now let's see what color this made, because I think this is going to be pretty too. So this mixture is an orange from the pink grapefruit and the yellow mixed with some ultramarine rose. Yeah, that's pretty. So this is another color that I'm going to use for the calendula flowers. I can even mix a little bit more of the rose in there to give it even more of a pinky. Yeah. So all of these colors I'm going to use in my flowers. Now we're going to mix a neutral color, and neutral colors are grays, browns, blacks, and you can mix them with colors that are opposite to each other on the color wheel. So blue and orange are opposite to each other, yellow and purple, and red and green. So for our purposes, we're going to be using the green and the pink grapefruit to mix our neutral color. And this makes a really nice dark neutral color. And this color we'll use in varying darknesses for the inside, the centers of the flowers, and then also these little, what are supposed to be black areas. So I'm going to add a little bit more red to this, the pink grapefruit, and see what that looks like. So that makes more of a brown. And then if you add more of this again, I'm just trying to get it really dark here. And this is what I used for the little middle of the Cosmo flower. So you can see it reads as black, basically. And there it is, swatched out. Okay, now for our foliage on our flowers, we're going to use a number of different greens. So let's mix our green paint with a little bit of the yellow. And this will make a really bright green, yellowy green. So there's that. And then if you mix in, now if you mix in a little bit of the pink grapefruit or the ultramarine rose, this will become, it'll still be green, but it'll be more of a dull green, more of like an earthy green. So you can see how that changes it. Now let's mix some more of the patina, the blue color, into this. And this just turns it more of like a turquoisey green color. Here we go, like that. Which is also really pretty. Okay, so these are the shades that we're going to use in our painting. So we're going to get started we're going to jump right into the main picture, and we're going to start with this Cosmo flower here. So this is approximately, I would say, a little bit lower than center, and also a little bit over to the right side of the picture. So we're going to start by painting this petal here, and the ultramarine rose is really pretty because it's got great transparency. So we're actually going to use a technique called glazing to make these petals. And with the glazing, it gives you that that illusion of the petals overlapping each other, which looks really cool. So we're going to start with this petal, and we're going to alternate petals first to allow these a chance to dry before we put the other petals in between them, because we don't want our petals to bleed into each other in this case. Sometimes we do, this time we don't. So I'm going to start my Cosmo flower, and I'm going to mix. First, I'm going to clean this off a little bit. I'm going to mix the ultramarine rose with just a tiny bit of the pink grapefruit. More of that there. All right. So I'm going to start with this petal here. And the petals kind of curve, they're long petals, and they kind of curve around, and then at the top they've got a little bit of a jagged edge, and into the center they come to a point. Here's my first petal. Now I'm going to do a petal at about 45 degrees from this one, like this. Now this petal is going to be approximately the same length. Okay, so I've got my first two petals in, and I'm going to add another one at the bottom at about a 45-degree angle, and this petal is going to be a little shorter because we are giving a 3/4 view of the flower head, which means that it's slightly turned so that the petals that are closest to us, the bottom ones, are going to look shorter than the upper petals. That's called foreshortening. So now I've got my 5 petals in here, and I'm just tapping a little bit of the pink grapefruit into the center tip of the petals while they're still wet. And now I'm going to paint the alternating petals of the top flower here. And this view is just from the side. So I'm just going to do the 3 petals with my ultramarine rose, and then we'll wait for those to dry before we do the petals in between. And same idea here, I'm going to tap a little bit of the pink grapefruit into the bottom of the petal once I get the basic shapes in. Yeah, that's looking good. So I'm going to put just a little bit of the pink grapefruit, because if you look at a real Cosmo flower, you'll see that there's this brightness that comes out from the center that's really distinct. So that's what we're trying to mimic here. All right, so now I need to let all of these petals dry before we can do the petals in between. And that's not quite dry yet, so we'll move on to the calendula flowers. And these are really fun to paint. because the shape of the brush is going to make all of the individual petals, which is really fun. Now these flowers are slightly turned as well, so we're also going to be doing a 3/4 view. So here's my first calendula flower in kind of a medium orange, and I'm going to try to mix up some different shades. So I'm just using the shape of my brush with the point out at the tip of the petal and pulling it in towards the center. And you can see that as I go around, I'm leaving a center. As I go around this bloom, I'm making my petals shorter to one edge and longer to the other. And so once I get the center in, you'll be able to see how it makes it look like the flower head is kind of turned to the left. And I'm going to mix up a little bit more of like a pinky. I'm going to put some of that pink grapefruit in with the yellow to try to get more of a rosy hue for my next flower head. It's still going to be mostly orange, but it's going to have a little bit of a pinky hue to it. And this one is also turned, but it's going to be turned more towards the right. So my longer petals are on the upper left, and my shorter petals are going to be kind of almost hiding under this first calendula bloom that we did a minute ago. And I'm just putting, it's kind of hard to see because this is a light color, which I really like and I want to keep it. You'll be able to see more details as we go. Okay, so now I'm going to do another bloom. I'm going to eventually get 4 of these calendula flowers. So I'm mixing up like a real bright, deep orange color for this one. And this one is going to be kind of hanging down to the right here. So same thing, I'm pulling my petals in around the center and making the petals on the top side shorter because this flower head, we're making it look like it's hanging down towards the right. And I like how that looks. Sometimes I'm putting a few more petals in between my first petal strokes. I'm just going by sight, putting in what I think looks good. Now for this upper flower, I want to make another rosy orange color. And this flower head is going to be facing up to the left. So the longest petals will be on the top and the shorter ones are going to be on the bottom. Now on the bottom petals, I'm turning some of them actually towards that top right corner as well, because this is going to be an even different view of that flower head. And you'll be able to see that more clearly as we go. Now we're going to put in the other petals on our cosmos, the petals that go in between, and this is going to start to look really pretty because we're getting this glazing effect. So we're putting one layer of watercolor over another layer. That's called glazing. And so it shows this really subtle, transparent overlap. Now here in the center of my flower, I am using my brush like an eraser to lift some of the color out of the center because we're going to be making that yellow eventually. And so I just use a dry brush and I lift that color out of the center and then dab my brush off to get the pigment off. That's a real easy trick for fixing mistakes in your watercolor. So I'm continuing to put the petals in between, and don't forget that as you're going around the flower head, your petals towards the bottom are going to be shorter. because we've made our flower look foreshortened here. And I think this is looking really pretty. I love how you see that overlap of the petals. It just gives it a really delicate feeling. So you can see I'm lifting a little bit more of the color out just so we get a really defined center to that flower. And I'm going to touch a little bit of the pink grapefruit into those new petals as well. So let's do um, the rest of the petals on our top Cosmo that we're looking at from the side. And cosmos get really tall, so I kind of think of this one as like, I'm looking at this almost from the bottom because it's gotten so tall in the flower bed, and it's like a foot over my head. So all I'm seeing is its floppy, delicate little head, um, kind of bending in the wind above me. And here's my pink grapefruit that I'm putting in the bottom of those new petals, and you can see the overlap that I'm getting on those as well, which is pretty. All right, so now I'm going to mix up a dark neutral color and put in the centers of my calendula flowers, and then you'll really start to be able to see um, how these flowers are working out. So I'm mixing the pink grapefruit with the green, and I'm putting a little bit more of the pink grapefruit into it to make it more of a brown color. Now I'm putting the centers in the calendula flowers, and I'm making sure to remember how I've faced their little flower heads, because the foreshortening, you want to be consistent in the centers as well. So like on this flower head, for example, I'm only going to put like about half of the center in, because that's all you're able to see from the angle at which we've put that flower. And kind of same thing down here. You can maybe see a little tiny bit of it at the top, but most of the center you're seeing from the bottom. So you'll notice that I've also left the very center white. We're going to put a much darker neutral color in there because that's how calendula centers look. So just to remind us to keep that distinct, where I'm going to leave the center white. So I'm going to put a few stems in here for the Cosmo, and then the little, I'm not exactly sure what they're called actually, the little tiny little spikes that kind of come out from the back center of the flower head. It's like attached to the stem, and they're just these really delicate little green spikes that come out after the bud has opened. They kind of fall down. So that's what I'm doing here. They're almost like these little tendrils, and they really make the Cosmo look like a Cosmo, I think. So we want to make sure to get those in here. Some of them I'm going to wait to put in until some of the other painting is dry, but I've got a few of these that you can see coming out from the back here, like that, and that's looking good. So I might put a few more of those in later, but for now, I like how that is looking. All right, so let's put some stems onto the calendula flowers, and I'm going to mix some green with my brown neutral color just to kind of tone that bright green down a little bit. So I'm putting stems just in a couple places so that we can see more clearly how those flower heads are bending. And then they all have those little extra thick petals right under the flower head as well that kind of come out from the center back of the flower. And I just use my brush to kind of stamp the leaf shape in that way. Now, Cosmo foliage is really interesting because it's kind of frilly, very delicate looking. And so that's what I'm going to start to put in now is all these little tendrils of little Cosmo foliage, and I'm just kind of putting it where I think it's going to look good. So on the Cosmo leaves, what I usually try to do is pull out like the center stem there, and then I put several more center stems coming off of them, and then I fill all of them in with like the little the small little strokes to make that foliage, and I'll explain that again when I put some more in. I'm gonna give these calendula heads a little bit more detail, so I'm mixing up a similar color to what I put in first, but a little darker, to just go back over some of the petals and make them pop a little bit more. And I like that color there, and I'm gonna mix up more of that darker red with the pink grapefruit and the yellow to put into that bottom flower head, I think. So I noticed that my yellow is kind of dirty, so I'm just lifting the green out of it so that I don't turn my orange muddy yucky color. So that's a nice orange. I like that. I'm going to add that to this upper flower head for a little bit more definition. And you can see on the bottom of this flower head, I'm kind of turning some of my petals up because that is the angle that we're seeing some of them from. And I like the brightness of this orange, so I'm going to put a little bit in this flower over here on the left as well. And then I'm just going to give some more detail to these guys. I mean, these, I think the thing about calendula flowers that's interesting is that often the bottom, the underside of their petal is this really dark color, and then the top is a lighter color. And so depending on which way you're looking at it, they've got two different colors. But I want to get some of those shades into these flower heads just because we're only seeing them from the front. So I've got more of a rosy shade to add to this one here. And I'm not putting strokes everywhere. Just adding in a little bit of detail to these to make the individual petals stand out more. And I think those are looking good. So I'm going to try to mix up a really, really dark neutral black. So in this neutral, I'm going to be using more of the green than I did for the brown that we made. A really dark black, and I'm just going to tap it into the center. And I might leave like a little bit of white border between the brown and the dark black, and maybe even some little white highlights in the center of the flower. Yeah, so you can see how that really conveys that really dark center. And on the Cosmo, it has that interesting little round of black little tendrils that come up from the center, but it's like really stands out against the transparent pink of the petals and then the yellow of the cosmos center. So I'm going to be sure to let my little black dots in that cosmos center dry before I try to put any yellow in, so I don't risk any bleeding. So I'm going to add a few more of these green tendrils up here in this Cosmo head because I think um, it really gives the impression of what kind of flower this is. So those pink petals are all dry now, and that's why I can put the green on top and not worry about any bleeding. And I'm going to use the same dark kind of brown green color to just put some of these little fuzzies around the center of the calendula flowers. We're just giving an impression here. You want to remember that when you're painting with watercolor, um, you're trying to find sort of a shorthand for conveying what you're painting, because watercolor it's challenging to get really detailed, and so you can give the impression of something usually with a lot less information. We're not trying to recreate a photograph. We're trying to give a distinctive painted impression. So now you can see while I was talking, I put in that yellow center on the Cosmo, and so I'm just going to let that dry now. So let's add some more foliage. You can see I pulled out that first middle stem of the Cosmo leaves, and now I'm putting individual little stems off of that central one, and then I'm putting tiny little greenery on those. So this can take a little while, but you know, it's worth it. And I try to just be real loose, and it doesn't have to be so exact. In fact, the more exact you try to make it, the less realistic it's going to look. So here I'm pulling another central stem down, and I'm going to put these little stems coming off of it, and then I'm going to fill each of those little stems up with these little green tendrils of greenery. And I just keep doing that in a not very precise way, all the way down this middle stem. And I like how this greenery is, I've got some on the upper right, now I've got some on the lower left, so it's kind of mirroring each other and lending a nice balance to the painting, I think. So I might put a little bit more greenery up above this largest Cosmo head, and maybe I'll use some of this patina turquoise color to get another shade of green in here. A little bit brighter green, more pastel with that blue in it. So I'm going to put some up here as well. And actually, I think for some of these, yep, I'm going to make some little Cosmo buds to add just one more element to our painting. So this is going to be like a bud before the petals have opened, and I'm just putting in this bottom little green head that's opened up with the little green tendrils, and then we're gonna, once this is dry, I'm gonna put in the top pink bud part of the petals that are showing, but they haven't fully opened yet. And here's another one that I'm just putting right here to kind of fill up the space and also to give some balance. I've got these two buds on the top part of the painting, and I've got this one down towards the bottom of the painting. And here's some more of the greenery that I'm adding, coming off of these buds, and just sort of filling up this space up here. And I like how that green is more of that turquoise color. I think that looks pretty. And once these little bud stems are dry, I'm going to add the pink top to them. And then I think our painting will be mostly done. It's looking really good. And I'm just being real loose with adding in this foliage because I'm trying to convey a sense of delicacy in the leaves. So I'm almost finished here. I'm really happy with how that foliage is looking. And I'm just gonna use, I think, more of the pink grapefruit in my buds than I used in the flower. And I'm also gonna put in these little central petal details with that same pink grapefruit rosy color. And that looks nice. So I'm gonna just pull a few of those down. And yeah, I'm trying to be real light with my paintbrush so that I get a more of a fine line. And moving your paintbrush faster is a good way to achieve a fine line like that. The slower you go, the easier it is to get a thick line. And now I'm going to mix a little bit more of the ultramarine rose in to put in those little buds on the stems that we've already established there. And I'm just going to kind of do like this round little bud on top. And that looks, yep, that looks good. And I think we are just about done. Thank you so much for joining me. Please send me messages to my email or my Facebook. Post your pictures on Instagram. You can hashtag it workshop in a box or at Esther Bly Designs. Thanks for joining me.